Hello and welcome to episode 49 of Match It and the Other Guy. And as ever, Kevin and I are sitting outside my home on the banks of Lake Wylie in Charlotte, North Carolina. Kevin, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well this evening.
Now, it's unusual that I say how are you doing this evening because typically we record most of our shows around mid-morning to noon, but this is an evening recording.
It is. A little change of pace.
Yeah, and the humidity has dropped down because it's the evening.
Yes, it's very nice out.
It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Sun's setting and it won't be too long before it's getting quite dark quite fast.
Yeah, and then the mosquitoes will be out and we'll start complaining again.
Yes, we'll have to run for cover.
Well, I never
Knowing
know.
how they are in this region of the country.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, they were out in force last night, which
Lord.
made me think of them tonight.
Yeah.
I never know what we're going to be talking about, and our gentle listener doesn't know what we're going to be talking about, but we all rely on you to give us a topic of conversation. So fill us all in. What are we talking about this evening?
Well, we've often covered many different genres of entertainment and such like that. And one we haven't done, and since Halloween is coming, I think we need to do monster movies. Or movie monsters, either way you want to look at it.
Okay,
We've not
yeah.
covered that area yet, so
Yes.
I want to kind of get your first, experiences as a kid. First scary movies you saw, or
Yeah, well, my early memories of horror movies would be the Hammer House of Horrors. Does that name ring a bell to you? I have a feeling they were British-made movies, but they were quite, I say quite famous, quite well known, certainly in England then, in the 60s and 70s. But they would feature Dracula and Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein and that sort of thing, those sort of themes. But Hammer House of Horrors, I think, they were a movie company that were around for quite a long while. Maybe they still are. Maybe it was a British thing and never really made it over to the States.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
The most famous one are they call them the Universal monsters that they did. That did the Bela Lugosi Draculas.
Yeah.
The Boris Karloff Frankenstein movies. Those type of things. Was it Lon Chaney Jr. was the Wolfman? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that is right.
Yeah,
I
that
think
sounds
that's
right.
Yeah. So Hammer House of Horrors would have Vincent Price and Christopher
really?
Lee would have been in them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Bela Lugosi. My memory of Bela Lugosi is Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Which I've never seen.
You need
I know. Everybody should see
You
it.
need to see that movie. Yes, and I stumbled across it once again in England many years ago, and it's one of those classic cult movies that it is so bad that it's fantastic.
Yeah. Every cinemaphile needs to see it to say they have.
Yes, and poor old Bela Lugosi, of course, it died halfway through that production.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And so the actor who stood in for Lugosi to allow the movie to be finished, it was such a low budget, low key movie that they were thinking, well, how can we do this? So the simple cure was to have the actor playing Bela Lugosi to always have his cloak wrapped around his face with his arm underneath it so you could just see his eyes peeking out. But, yes, it was truly dreadful, but terrific.
Yeah, no benefits of CGI to work his original look in there.
No, and it had marvelous scenes in, such as it would be there were several scenes set in a graveyard at midnight, as you can imagine in this spooky vampire space orientated movie. So the scenes were unfolding in a graveyard at midnight, and then the very next scene it was high noon and the chaps are driving along in a car with the sun blazing away. Switch immediately back to midnight again.
No.
back in the graveyard. But anyway, gentle listener, if you too have never seen Plan 9 from Outer Space, like Kevin, you should all get together and watch it one night.
Mine was you got to remember again, especially our younger listeners. You just saw what was shown on
Sure.
TV. That was your only option. And it wasn't like, there was movies all the time and such like that. So I as I went through grade school and stuff like that, I knew of like the classic Universal monster movies and stuff. But I don't think I ever saw them. And I don't remember, I'm sure they came on or something. But I'm sure as I was a certain age, Mom was like, "We're going to steer you away from that. I don't need you waking us up in the middle of the night." But so I really never ever saw those.
Yes.
I do remember seeing Godzilla.
Right.
It was going to be on like on a Friday night, and I was all hunkered down in the den. Mom and Dad were off doing something because they had no interest in watching us. They were doing something else in another part of the house, and I watched Godzilla. Don't remember much about it, but obviously it was the original black and white version.
Yeah.
And
Now, my one fond memory that I'd love to share with you and our gentle listener about Godzilla is my brother and I, for Christmas one year, both received. They weren't Airfix models, but they were similar to they were assembly model kits, and one was a witch standing over a cauldron that my brother had, that you had to assemble and paint, and mine was Godzilla. And the really cool thing about this, I'll keep calling it an Airfix model because I can't think of the company that produced it, but it wasn't Airfix. But one of the cool features about both of these models is they had certain parts of the model were glow-in-the-dark plastic.
I had the exact same one.
There you go. Right.
Aurora, maybe?
Oh, I think that's exactly
I think
right.
it might have been Aurora.
And there was a whole range of them, but
Yep.
my brother had the witch and I had Godzilla. Now here's
Stood about 12 inches tall.
Yes, that's
when
exactly
completed.
right.
Yep.
And there's a little
I had the exact same.
there was a
Godzilla.
little sort of 90-degree backdrop to where the witch or Godzilla the monster was standing. Right, remember?
Yeah.
And of course we had to paint them. And I could have been no more than seven or eight, and I was watching my brother build his witch, and it was looking so cool and professional, and he was very good at doing the details, and everything was looking great. And I was young and still learning and making quite a mess of it, and I was becoming very, very frustrated not being able to paint the cityscape to look realistic with the limited amount of paints that I had to produce all the lights and the different colours, and it didn't look anything. I couldn't produce anything like it looked on the box. This is where I was
Boxes
going.
always look really good.
Exactly that. And my brother came over to him and he said, "Look, you're sweating the small stuff." He didn't say that because that's not an expression that existed in England, but it was similar to that. He said, "All you have to do is just do it abstract. Just put your brush into the paint and just blob it on the buildings and do several different colours, and it'll look great. It looked like the whole city is on fire because of what's been happening with Godzilla." And I took his advice, and it was the simplest cure. But I remember it to this day thinking, we said it before, like simplicity is the art of sophistication. He said, just don't overthink it. Just put the paint on.
Yeah.
And it's a lesson that my brother taught me, and I remember it to this day. Yeah, from Godzilla and from that model that we both had.
Yeah, we're gonna have to look it up online
Yeah.
and see the picture of it again.
Yes,
Because I sold mine no less than 15 years ago.
Did you?
On eBay.
Yes,
Yeah,
wow.
I'd had it, just in the box after it was built and then put away.
Yeah.
And I remember selling it, so I had it all those
So
years.
if memory serves, they were so you could have the glow-in-the-dark head and the non-glow-in-the-dark
Yep.
head to paint. And I think his tail was also a glow-in-the-dark tail.
Part of it, I think, was, and then the spine, the
spine, yeah. The
spines.
plates down the back of the
His
spine
feet were, and the
Yes.
hands, if you wanted to use them. Now they had the plain green, and you could just do it all in
That's
green.
exactly right.
So-
Yes, wow.
That's fine.
So you never know when we sit down and have
That's
these
true.
conversations, and we never know what we're going to be talking about. Where do these memories suddenly come from? Because I would never have thought about that assembly Godzilla kit if you hadn't talked about that. And what are the odds that we both had the same thing? Isn't that amazing?
Two sides of the pond.
That's right. Yeah.
Another
Aurora.
one-
Yeah, I think that's right. Aurora.
Yeah, we'll have to
or
look that
something
up
like
for
that,
sure.
yeah,
It's either
yeah.
Aurora or maybe Monogram.
Yeah.
But another thing that I guess it was just around that era, and I guess Godzilla was kind of a thing. There was a toy set called the Shogun Warriors,
Okay.
and they were fighting warriors from Japan. They were about 2 feet tall.
Yeah.
Now, of course, as a kid, they looked bigger now.
Right.
But
Yeah.
and they also created a Godzilla, and I asked for that for Christmas. And all he did was he stood up, and you could kind of roll him because under his feet were half wheels.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they're full wheels, but under the thing you couldn't see him.
Yeah, you could see half
And
of the wheel. Yeah.
his arm you could lift up and press a button on his wrist, and his fist would shoot out like a rocket. And on the back of his head there's a lever, and you could push down the lever, and his like vinyl tongue would come out about 3 inches that
Yeah.
had fire on it.
cool.
So when it came out, it looked like it was fire. And that's kind of all he did.
Right.
And it's one of those, I think you play with it 5 minutes and you're kind of like, well, that's about all there is to this. But, I had it, and I've had it for X amount of years until I did something with it.
And it was called Shogun Warrior, was it?
The group of family of toys was called
yeah.
Shogun Warriors, and he was part of that.
Okay.
And around the same size.
Yes. Well, Godzilla starred in many movies by now, hasn't he? I mean, a lot of...
Well, he took on so many creatures back in the day. First, Godzilla versus X, Y, and Z,
Yes, and Godzilla is one of those characters, a little bit like King Kong, that has made the leap from being the anti-hero to the hero.
Yeah.
Early, I think they were Japanese black and white movies was probably the first time I ever discovered Godzilla.
Oh, that was that first one, the original 50s movie?
In the 50s,
Yeah,
and
seems right.
very much he was the anti-hero, the villain of the piece. And then, of course, with the introduction of other monsters. What was the one that looked like a big flying moth?
Mothra.
Oh, that's right.
Well, there was
The
Mothra.
clue was right there. Mothra, yeah.
Rodan. Was Rodan the flying turtle?
Oh, I'm not sure about that.
I know, there's probably people with their heads going, ah! But,
Yeah,
he took on so many different things.
Now, if I remember right, Mothra, the weak point in Mothra to me was I don't think Mothra's wings moved in any way. If I remember right, they were kind
As
of
they swung him from the fishing line?
They were kind of
sounds
fixed
about
wings.
right.
Yes. But Godzilla's gone on from strength to strength, and fairly recent movies I've seen. Right.
The most recent one that came out within the past year and a half or somewhere in there, whereas he did take on these other creatures.
Mothra again was back.
And he's the hero. He's helping humanity,
Yes.
fighting them. And I think that's the second or third in this new Godzilla
Yes.
run. Now, we saw the first one. My wife and I actually went and saw it at the theater, and it was actually very enjoyable.
I mean,
liked it.
I'm afraid to say I think I have seen all three of them, but as with many movies that I see these days, I kind of, I leave the movie theater, and within 15 minutes I can't really remember what it was I've just watched. But it's a bit like watching some of the Marvel movies. With all due respect to the Marvel movies, as we've talked about in another episode of our podcast, I kind of get lost with the characters and can't remember what's happening. But anyway, yes, Godzilla, marvelous character. And we just mentioned King Kong in
I'm glad you mentioned King Kong, because that was one that when I was younger in the 70s, they would rerun that, 76 iteration with Jeff Bridges?
Okay, yeah.
I think it was 76 when it originally came out. I barely remember it coming out to the theater. I was too young, and nobody's going to take me to see it. But I remember the poster.
Yes.
I think in the poster, King Kong is straddling the Twin Towers, holding a jet in his fist.
Wow.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yes.
Because he does climb the World Trade Center in the 76 version. But they would show the reruns of that one, on just the Sunday night movie or whatever.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. I'd watch it a few times anytime it came on. It's kind of like, when James Bond would come on or Chitty Chitty Bang Bang would come on. It's kind of an event, and I'll sit down.
You'll sit down and
hunker
watch.
down for the evening,
Well, that was the great thing to me about King Kong, was this reversal of it's a bit like Frankenstein's monster. It's the same thing. It's like you watch this character, and Godzilla, we just said the same. Is he or she the evil villain, the anti-hero of the piece? And then you soon realize as the story develops that actually they're not the monster at all. It's everybody around them that's the monster.
Yeah.
It's the villagers attacking Frankenstein's monster, hunting him down with pitchforks, and it's the military attacking King Kong on the Empire State Building in the early editions, the early versions of the movie. Yeah, I like that. I like the way those plots twist, and you have to think about it a little bit more.
Yeah, they really they've become classics, obviously.
Yes.
And then, really, again, I wouldn't see the actual movies, but they would always, around Halloween, they would always do some, special, and they would look at all the great monster movies from back, and they'd show the clips and stuff like that. So you'd see the old Universal ones, the Creature from Black Lagoon, and in all these different things, and they show a little bit more modern stuff, like clips from, say, The Omen or something like that.
Yeah.
They would kind of scare me as a kid. And this one I remember vividly, that it was just the trailer for the Amityville Horror came on on normal TV.
Okay.
I slept in my parents' bedroom on the floor that night. So that's the only time ever
Yeah.
that I ever did that. But just the trailer for the Amityville Horror freaked me out.
Yeah, some folks love horror movies and being scared to death, and some folks don't. Yeah, I've never been particularly attracted to horror movies just for the sake of horror. But I do like those early movies with the different characters in. Of course, that's always going to take us to Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein.
Well, which is actually one of my next things I was going to. You're leading me right into good conversation here.
We've known each other too long.
I guess so. This must have been after we moved to Florida because we were
Yeah.
visiting with my sister. I told you we always stayed up there.
Yeah.
And we were staying with her, and the family next door, they had some older kids. They were teenagers, and they were good about including us and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, well, they had rented. This is when you rented on VHS, and
Right.
it was a big deal to go to the video store. Well, they got Young Frankenstein
Yeah.
and Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween.
Oh, okay.
So very, both kind of scary-ish, but two totally different ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
And I remember watching both of them. I was kind of a little young to be watching probably Halloween at the time, but I handled it okay. I remember maybe it's just that era where I'm just getting to where I can start watching these.
Right.
And then we watched Young Frankenstein also. So I kind of got introduced to one of the greatest comedic scary movies of all time, quote. And then one of the greatest, which I think actually goes down as probably one of the greatest horror movies ever, was John Carpenter's Halloween. Just what they did with zero budget,
Yeah.
and how it has stayed, and it is still pretty freaky to watch. So
Well, I suppose it goes back to we've talked about this in many different genres of almost everything we've talked about, but you don't need a great budget for something to be a success. We talked about it with commercials fairly recently, haven't we? It's just you just need it to be right. It just needs to work.
just have the right formula,
Yeah.
and for it just to come together. And again, simplicity. And
Yeah.
I think we've discussed this before. Often with anything kind of scary or unknown, it's what you don't see
It's
that is
what-
far scarier than what you do.
It's absolutely what you don't see. Yes, you're right, and you could say that about the first Alien movie. When they were trying to figure out, we're struggling to know what to do here to make it look as scary and realistic as we can do, and the answer was, well, don't show it.
Yeah.
Unless you have to, don't show the monster.
It's uncanny. You're hitting all my top points
No.
because I was definitely going to make sure we talk about Alien, because
Yeah.
I consider that to be, of course, it is sci-fi and horror at the time, but it's a absolute masterpiece. And
Yeah.
Aliens can be argued that it's even better. It's kind of like The Godfather and Godfather 2. You kind of pick one. Both Alien and Aliens were fantastic.
Yes, yeah.
And two totally different, take you on two different rides to go along with them.
I quite like the Alien movies, and I quite like the ongoing plot and the theme and the storyline that's being slowly woven into. I'm just going to stop and just say, if you look over there, Kevin, is that a deer that we can see right on the little peninsula there?
Yep.
I know our gentle listener, as this is an audio experience, can't really enjoy that to the maximum. But yes, there's a wonderful deer looking out over the lake over there.
Yeah, just on the little point there across the halfway part of the cove.
Yes, and I think one of the scariest aspects of all of the Alien movies, to me personally, is not so much the alien or the face hugger and how it had attacked people, but it was before that. It's the opening of that egg.
Yep.
Just the movement of the egg beginning to open, if we want to call it an egg. You see the petals start to peel back and the goo around it, and you know what's coming. I think that's the thing that does it.
Yeah.
For me personally, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
too, I think. Well, I've commented on this before. Alien will be fantastic 1,000 years from now because it's kind of timeless. It doesn't put you in it doesn't look dated.
Yeah.
You never, it's never going to look old and, way, that's just so silly and ridiculous now, as some horror movies could be. And it's going to last for a very, very long time and still be poignant.
Yes, I have a feeling we've spoken about this to a degree before, but I think the idea of the future looking used is something that Star Wars gave us.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah. It's not clean, spit and polish like the Enterprise.
Not exactly that. with all due respect to the Enterprise, which always looks very new, certainly in those original first series episodes, yeah. And yes, as soon as we had Star Wars and things looked like they'd been used, that was copied through. And you're absolutely right, I remember thinking the same, yeah, with Alien. The landscape looks used, the machinery looks used.
Very much so.
Yeah.
It was just,
yeah.
They were just like, it was like essentially a truck, a space truck that was doing its job and had a
Yes.
small crew. Yeah.
And there's also that the element in Aliens which work, I think particularly with Alien, is you can't get off the ship. There's no way of getting off the ship. Whatever is on the ship, we've got to deal with it. There's no running away from it because we can't go anywhere. Yeah, that's an appealing thing for a horror movie, I think, is to keep that.
Yeah,
keep the tension up. Yeah.
I wish I could even remember when I first saw Alien. I can't remember if I saw it, unedited, or if it was just like a TV version again that came on a couple of years after it did. But I do remember, in '79 when it came out, the toys, like the 2 foot tall alien being at the toy store.
Oh,
I
really?
wish I bought everyone they had because they're highly collectible.
Have you got one now? Have you got one in stock?
I wish I did. And they were cool as all get out. But I still
bet.
remember seeing it at the the little store that just had a little toy department. It was in the corner.
Yes.
But then we went on to they started at around late '70s into early '80s. Then you started having the slasher films. You had the Friday the 13th series, which led to the Freddy Krueger movies and all those. And we would, as teens, that's just kind of what you go see and stuff like that. So I ended up seeing.
I've never been attracted to those movies, I must say.
Looking back, I'm kind of like going, they definitely weren't my.
I'm going to put my hand up
now.
and say I've never seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I did,
I never have either.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
The original. Again, it's one of those things.
I thought it was just me.
I think most should be, if you consider yourself a cinemaphile, but I have not.
Yeah.
They were just. There were two. Some you could kind of sneak in. R-rated.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be here, which kind of made it more interesting. And I'll never forget this one. We went. I'd have to look up the year, but we were early teens or something like that.
Okay.
So we couldn't go without an adult. But my friend's grandmother took us to see Friday the 13th Part 4.
All right.
So I still look back on this going, here we are, my buddy and I, and she's sitting there, and probably kind of like the Queen of England with a little pocketbook sitting on her lap, and she's just watching this movie with us, and it's just blood, gore, and little questionable things for our age to be seeing, and she just sat there and watched it all the way through with us, and we went on. Very odd looking back at that, but she's a good sport, I guess.
No question of that. One comment I meant to, we moved off topic, but I'm thinking about Young Frankenstein or Young Frankenstein, whichever way you want to pronounce it. If you've watched the movie, you'll know why I say that. But Young Frankenstein featured the original laboratory equipment from the original Frankenstein movie.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Dug back in the archives of the warehouse and pulled them out again. It's a master. I consider that to be one of the at least top 10 comedies of all time.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it really is. It's everything about it. I mean, the very fact that it's deliberately filmed in black and white for a start.
Yeah. Was it 1973 or
I wonder
something?
how difficult it was to produce convince the movie studios that that's the way to go, or if Mel Brooks had just such control at that time, he could do what he wanted. No one was going to question
I wonder
it.
if did it come out before Blazing Saddles or after? Because they seemed like they were right around the same time.
Want to say it was after Blazing Saddles.
If it was, he probably had a lot of credibility and said, I'm just doing what I want. So.
Yeah, I'm sure it was after Blazing Saddles. Yeah, but anyway, a great movie. There's lots about it, and Terry Garr, so funny in that movie.
Yeah, and quite beautiful at the time too.
Well, yes, absolutely, and it's often said that if you get a really good actress, but it's also funny. It's not that common, but boy oh boy, Terry Garr, she had it.
Yeah, she's one that I've always loved her career.
Great timing.
I love her in anything she does.
Yeah, all of that. I mean, just absolutely had it. Yeah. It was terrific.
Well, of course, Gene Wilder was a genius, and then we lost Marty Feldman a number of years ago, but I think that was his penultimate role.
Terrific. What other great horror movies or genres can you remember enjoying?
Well, I'll tell you another one that was very interesting around the mid '80s. And I recommend anyone watching this if they like just the era of it's kind of a slasher movie in a way, but
Okay.
it's called April Fool's Day. And
Don't remember that
All
at
I'm
all.
saying is watch it for the ending.
Okay.
And it's a very, it's very 80s nostalgic. You're going to look back, everybody's hairdos and what they're wearing is very, very 80s. And it stars, I can't remember her name right off, but the girl that was in Valley Girl. And it also had Amy Steele, who had been in one, maybe two of the Friday the 13th movies.
All right.
So they kind of, she kind of had credibility in that genre. So they
Yeah.
brought her on for this. But it's an interesting twist at the end. You go, oh, and I'm not going to spoil it, but it's well worth watching for just that.
Oh, now we'll have to watch it. Now,
Yeah,
so-
and it's not a bad movie. It's just you kind of go along with the ride. Then like I think Nightmare on Elm Street did kind of change it was a kind of a groundbreaking story.
Do you know, I don't think I've seen Nightmare on Elm Street either. I think that's another movie. Yeah.
Again, I'm not a huge horror fan, so it's
Yeah.
not, I've seen, in fact, I saw part 2 before I saw the original. I was out with the girlfriend I was dating, and we ended up, it was what was playing at the theater, and we went and saw it, and then I was like, well, now I have to go back and watch the original. And then so I think I saw number 3 with a buddy in high school. Then when I was hanging out you got to remember I think I told you when I was in college, all my friends that I hung out with, that we like shared a house with and stuff,
Yeah.
they worked at the movie theater.
Yeah.
So we
You
could
told
go,
me
we
this
would
before.
go see
Yeah, that's
anything and
fantastic.
everything because
Yeah.
we could just walk in anytime we wanted. And
Yeah.
so I know we saw quite a few then. I still remember seeing
Oh,
Halloween
you were so
5.
lucky. What a great group of friends to have that were in the cinema.
Oh, I know. I met them like the first semester of college. So from that point
Yeah,
on,
that's right.
for years, all the movies we wanted were free.
Yeah.
We just pile in and head somewhere. The great thing was, it was kind of cooperative between the different theaters. Everybody kind of knew each other. Whereas if your theater might not be showing the movie you wanted to see,
Yeah.
you would just go down the street and just talk to manager, Bob.
Yeah.
Bob knows Jim at your theater,
And Bob's gonna let you in.
because they're going to want to come see something at their theater occasion. So there's always that quid pro quo, and you can
Yeah.
really see anything in town pretty much as long as I'm hanging with these guys that work there. It was great.
Did you ever see An American Werewolf in London?
I did.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think the last time I've only seen it once all the way through, and I have it on my DVR right now.
Do you?
And it's been sitting there for at least a year.
Now, the
'Cause
reason-
I want to sit down and watch it.
The reason
all
I'm
the way through.
asking if you have seen that movie is because there's a cameo role, or one of the very first role, of Rick Mayall
Oh, really?
from The Young Ones.
Oh,
fame,
I will
of course.
definitely want to see
Yes,
that.
that's right.
Will I know
Now,
him immediately?
Yeah, you should do. I mean, he's kind of, if I remember right, if memory serves, he's looking a little bit like his Kevin Turvey character, which you may or may not be aware of.
I think you've told me about it. But
Yeah, it was kind of a Kevin Turvey investigates something this
Yes.
week, but it's in the pub scene, and I think the camera pans across and you see Rick Mayall playing chess. But I think
Okay.
that's possibly
I'm
one of
definitely
the
gonna look for it.
that's possibly the first movie he was ever in.
Yeah.
He's in there for about 5 seconds, but he's there. And
Wow,
yeah,
that's great.
So worth watching just for that alone.
Well, and two, once October hits, I really will want to watch, some scary, some related to Halloweeny type movies.
Right.
So I'll hopefully it's on the DVR and I'm going to squeak that one in. Somewhere I'll have to show it to you. I have a 8x10 from David Naughton, who is the main character, and it's a shot of him transforming,
Okay,
and he wrote on it, "To Kevin, beware the moon." David Naughton.
that's great.
Yeah.
Whatever you say 8x10, it immediately makes me think of Alice's Restaurant Massacre.
Yeah.
Yeah. 8x10.
But see, American Werewolf in London really
quality photographs.
took things in a new direction too. It was very different and told a different story. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that one up. I do need to.
Yeah,
that one again. Some really break the mold.
yeah, they do, and that
yeah.
was one that broke the mold. Absolutely,
And
it was,
The
yeah.
Exorcist was an amazing film. Now, I watched that when I was early teens,
Yeah.
and I was like, I don't know if I need to see this again. And I didn't watch it again until we were out of college, and we were just around Halloween, where a bunch of us had gathered at a friend's house,
Yeah,
and to watch scary movies, and that's one that they had picked. And that's the only other, I've seen it twice all the way through. It'll mess with you.
it's a fascinating movie, and it's a great book as well. Yes, we may have chatted about this before. Mike Oldfield, Tubular Bells was the
Oh, yeah.
theme music for it, and yes, it is. And again, the thing that did it for me about The Exorcist is you don't need blood and gore and people being murdered to make a horrifying movie, you need to have that element of you're not sure what's happening and just how evil can be.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it came across particularly well in the movie, but I do remember there are passages in the book where the priest is trying to decide, I'm sure we may have chatted about this before, the priest is trying to decide if the young girl is really possessed or if it's all in her own imagination. And so he's having a conversation with the perceived demon inside her to see whether or not he can fully explain what's happening. And at one point, I think he flicks what is supposed to be holy water, and there's an instant reaction from the poor girl, ow, this is burning, it's burning. But he hasn't put holy water on, it's just normal water. So then the conversation in his own mind is, but is the demon aware of that and pretending that there is nothing wrong, it's all psychosomatic and there's nothing actually wrong with her? It's an incredibly haunting passage in the book.
Yeah.
It's terrifying for that very reason.
Yeah,
just how
is
evil can be.
Quite amazing, actually.
Yeah.
Well, then there was around. You had that in early '70s, was it? That one came out. And
Yes,
then,
I think it was. Yeah.
And then you had the Omen series.
Yeah.
And I remember those being on. They would always show clips of them. When they were talking about compilations of great movies from the time. And I know I've seen them all three one time because it was the Omen. Was it Damien Omen 2, and then the Final Conflict?
Yes.
Which was Sam Neill. And his name, the guy from Jurassic Park,
Yeah,
was
right,
Damien.
Yeah.
So that was very early work of his that people kind of forgot about that he did. You're like, looking back, that was the guy from the main character in Jurassic Park, or one of them.
Yes, I like. I'm also a fan of the movie Constantine. Have you seen that movie?
I want to say I did. It's
Keanu Reeves
and Al Pacino, right?
No, not Al Pacino.
Oh no, that was the Devil's Advocate.
The Devil's Advocate.
Okay, yes. Then I don't think I did see Constantine actually.
Yes, Constantine. And I understand that Constantine started off as a graphic novel. We were talking about graphic novels fairly recently, weren't we?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I believe Constantine started out as a graphic novel, and then Keanu Reeves took on the character and produced starred in the movie. But again, it's more of that idea of the unknown, the netherworld between two worlds, and all of that. I'm kind of fascinated by that.
Yeah, and really, I mean, the horror genre leads right into. There's a fine line between horror and thrillers. Because then you've got Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
Which was an absolute masterpiece.
Yeah, now, Silence of the Lambs is absolutely horrifying to me. I mean, every time, there's so many scenes in there that just gives me goosebumps when I see it again.
And that's one that they kind of, not really a shoestring budget, but, they actually...
It just had all those right elements. A great cast, great story. I mean, the character of Hannibal Lecter has become such a household name. Because of Hopkins' portrayal of the character in the movie, and I know you've talked about it before that the reveal of Hannibal Lecter when he's in his cell is something special.
They say it's one of the greatest villain entrances of all time. Yet he doesn't enter. You just pan around, and he's just standing there.
It's getting dark on the porch.
It is. I know.
I'm afraid to look.
Is this the right topic we picked for an evening conversation?
I'm afraid to look behind.
Because nothing bad ever happened at lakes in the horror movies. No, Camp Crystal Lake, no problem.
It'd be awful to turn around and see Hannibal Lecter just staring at us from the shadows. Oh, look, gracious. Well, we better think on that. Then we better think about signing off, hadn't we?
Going and hiding.
Well, we're
somewhere.
still able to sign off.
Exactly. We hope it's not our final sign off, but if we're back next week, we survived.
Well, that was fun. It was another fun topic of conversation.
Yeah, I think it was a good one.
Yeah, it's great to think about Godzilla, and thank you for bringing that up because I've got such warm childhood memories of my brother teaching me the simplicity of just doing abstract painting on that cityscape. Yeah, I mean, it really did help me out of an awkward spot as a young kid, and again, I remembered that.
Well, I'll tell you one little story that goes along with that. I would, again, I love to go to the toy department at any place, but I remember specifically even seeing these at Kmart. There was this collection of model kits, and they were all like a giant spider is attacking the city.
Okay.
Or I can't remember what the other ones were, but they were just that kind of thing.
Things
it might have
attacking
been
the city.
the same, grouping that
Maybe,
we're talking about.
yeah.
But I vividly remember this gigantic spider crawling on the skyscrapers, or at least like 8-story buildings, and that type of thing.
We'll have to look up that series. Again, I'm sure the internet is our friend for that. But yes, I seem to remember there were at least half a dozen different
Yeah, and I'd like to know what
characters.
they were. We'll have to look that up.
Yeah. All right. Well, gentle listener, be safe. Don't turn around and find Hannibal Lecter behind you at the end of this episode, will you? And join us again for another episode of Matched and the Other Guy. Bye for now.
Good evening.